Hey everyone, I'm Pro Photographer Ian Plant, and if you've ever had your photos judged or critiqued, I bet at some point you've heard the question, what's your subject? And this question is usually meant to convey that your photograph has a cluttered visual design or that it's not entirely clear what your intent is in making the photograph. So your subject, your theme, your purpose for making the photograph isn't immediately clear, and the photo could use some further refinement. Ansel Adams once famously said that there's nothing worse than a sharp image of a fuzzy concept. So when making photos, it is important to be clear about what your subject is. The funny thing about that is that your subject isn't really your subject. So what do I mean by this? Well, if you want to find out, then stay tuned. Okay, here's something that I see a lot when I'm critiquing photos. The photographer will define their subject in a very literal way, say a bear, and then they'll zoom in tight only on that subject. And people do this because they've had this question drilled into their heads. What's your subject? And they've been taught to identify the subject and then just feature that subject, excluding everything else. But honestly, to me, the results are typically just not that interesting. And if you do this, you're missing out on a bunch of creative opportunities. And this is because your subject isn't what you think it is. Your subject should be something else. Now, I know this sounds very mysterious, but once I explain it, it'll make a lot more sense. When we think about our subject, most of us tend to think about this quite literally. For example, the subject of this photo seems very clear and straightforward. It's a lion. But how about with a photo like this? Sure, this is a photo of two lions, one male and one female, but the subject of the photo is really a story. It captures the moment when the two lions come together, revealing a story of bonding or affection between the two. The story is as important, if not more so, than the subjects themselves. In a sense, the story is the subject. And what about a photo like this? Sure, we've got a lion again, but can we really say that the subject here is just a lion? By taking a wider view, the visual story is getting more complex. The photo is an overall visual design that incorporates color, shape, and the magic of the moment. And what about this landscape photo, which I took in the Utah desert? What's the subject here? Is it the distant sandstone formation? Or is it the eroded badlands in the foreground? Or how about that amazing sunset sky and all of that golden color? Or is the subject all of these things? And for this photo taken in Death Valley, what's the subject? The sandstorm raging down below? The wicked thunderstorm raging above? The road? Well, kind of all that, but that's being too literal. If I'd been thinking of my subject as the sandstorm, for example, I might have just zoomed in tight on that one single visual element. Instead, I was thinking of my subject as the interaction between the thunderstorm and the sandstorm. So I included both, because I wanted to tell a story about the weather. And then I took it a step further and decided to incorporate the road into the composition. Then my subject became something else. It became the visual interaction between the two storms and the road acting as a leading line. So thinking more holistically about this idea of a subject led me to a more interesting photo. This may seem difficult to think about your subject in a different way, but here's the cool thing. Once you learn to stop thinking literally about your subjects, that's going to help you unlock your full potential as an artist. First, you learn that the photos you're making aren't only about your subject. You learn to take a broader view to tell more of a story. And then you realize that your subject isn't really your subject at all. Instead of having a subject, you have a bunch of objects, a bunch of visual elements that, when working together, create a composition, which is a visual design that tells a story or conveys a theme. And this composition is really your subject. What you thought was your subject is just one part of that overall visual design. It may be an important part, but it's still just a part. And once you free yourself from this more narrow view of subject, you realize that you don't need amazing subjects to make amazing photos. You can make amazing photos even when photographing everyday people, wildlife, or objects. Because when you take this expanded view of subject, Suddenly, you're on the hunt for interesting colors, shapes, visual relationships, and moments that come together in a photogenic way. Realizing that your subject isn't your subject is liberating, and it allows you to see beyond the obvious and make more compelling photos as a result. This is a huge part of what I teach in my critically acclaimed Ultimate Photography Composition course, which takes a deep dive into the secrets of making effective visual designs. The course is all about teaching you how to enhance your ability to use artistic abstraction, to move past thinking of your subject literally and narrowly, and instead seeing the bigger picture. Here's a few examples of what I'm talking about here. For my landscape photography, usually my subject isn't the landscape itself. I feature the landscape, but my subject is how weather and light interact with the landscape. And often my compositions are more focused on the foreground than the background scenery. By including interesting foregrounds, I invite the viewer into the full story of the landscape, giving them more of an immersive experience. With this approach, the landscape subject itself is just a small part of the overall visual design. With my wildlife photography, I'm usually taking a wider view, including the surroundings of the animal to tell more of a story and to make the visual design more compelling. I'm often working in complex lighting situations and rendering my wildlife subjects in silhouette to add a dose of mystery and to enhance the storytelling process. Even when I take a tighter view of my subjects, I'm still focusing on telling a story and establishing a deeper emotional connection between my viewers and my wildlife subjects. And for my aerial photography, I'm often dispensing with the narrow view of subject altogether. I'm not trying to photograph a specific thing, place, or object, but rather I am making abstract photos of the landscape below. Sure, I might be photographing salt marshes, or icebergs, or rivers, or deserts. I can put a name on these things, but what I'm really photographing is the visual interaction of shapes and colors, and of shadow and light. I'm looking for artistic visual designs, rather than focusing my attention on a specific object or landform. These examples show that by moving past thinking literally about your subjects, you can make better photos that stand out and get noticed. It's how you stop making photos like these, which are okay, but not really all that interesting, and start making photos like these, which command the viewer's eye, tell a story, and more effectively share your unique creative vision with the world. So when you're making photos, it is important to ask yourself, what's my subject? But if the answer you're coming up with is a mountain or a bear or a flower, then you're on the wrong track. You're thinking about it too literally, and you're missing out on creative opportunities because your subject isn't your subject. Instead, you should be thinking about your subject in terms of the theme of your photos, the story you are trying to tell, and the overall visual design you are creating. Only then will you unlock your full potential as an artist. Well, I hope you found this video helpful, and make sure to check out all of the other amazing resources available on PhotoMasters. I'm Ian Plant, wishing you good luck and great light. See you again next time. Bye-bye.